Hi, this is Chris Smith with Local Joe's. At Local Joe's, we help local business. Hi, this is Chris Smith with Local Joe's.
This is City Pulse Newsmakers, a weekly look at the issues and the people behind them in Greater Lansing. Brought to you by City Pulse, Lansing's weekly alternative newspaper. And now, here's your host, City Pulse publisher, Burl Schwartz.
Good morning. Our topic again this week is BRT. No, that's not a sandwich. Stands for Bus Rapid Transit. That's the plan that CATA is considering to speed up service from downtown Lansing to Meridian Mall, and it's controversial. Last week we had Debbie Alexander here. She's the Assistant Executive Director of CATA and in charge of the BRT project. This week we have four guests, two from the Lansing the Lansing Regional Chamber of Commerce. They are its President and CEO, Tim Damon, and Matt Rush from Rush Strategies, who's also chairs the Chamber's Policy Committee. And on the other side of the table, and perhaps on the other side of this issue in some regards, are also two guests. They are supporters of the BRT plan. Kevin Shane, who is the founding owner of the local internet provider ACD.net, and Joe Ross, a partner in communications and research, which is a public relations and marketing firm in East Lansing. And they are members of Better Together, which somehow has the acronym BRT. Haven't figured that one out exactly. But gentlemen, Tim, I want to start with you. Now, the Chamber has taken a position against the current plan, although you did just recently compliment CATA for its willingness to keep looking at this plan. Mm-hmm. But as of now, what are the Chamber's objections to the plan?
Well, I think we start with where we were when we first went through this process. First of all, I should probably back up. This is something that's been in the works now for a number of years. I think as everyone's aware, I think the first discussions of the BRT goes back to 2008, 2009, somewhere in that time frame. And, we've been at the table. We've been involved with kind of looking at this initially and looking at the corridor, Michigan Avenue. We led a group to Cleveland a year ago to look at the Cleveland BRT. I don't think anyone on that trip, and there were over 30 of us that were there, had ever physically seen a BRT, let alone maybe kind of rode on a BRT and what it looked like and how it functioned. We then went to, and I say we, the Chamber of Michigan State University went to Grand Rapids to look at the Grand Rapids model as well. So I think we've done a lot of due diligence in where we are. And so when we started going through the process and we had CATA into our policy committee, and just some of the basic questions I think that we asked about the the center lane infrastructure. We asked about the projected revenue, and when we say projected revenue, we're coming at it more from a private sector business side, and that is revenue. How many people are getting on that bus, and what are the fares, not the money that's coming from the government. We certainly don't look at that as being revenue. CATA may, but we certainly don't look at that as being revenue, and they weren't able to address that, and from a ridership standpoint as well. So we heard from a number of businesses along the corridor as well, including several of the larger employers are concerned over public safety.
Let's break this down a little. We'll get to each point.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
All right, on the revenue point, Tim and Matt, jump in here. Isn't it just common sense? You speed up transportation on Michigan Avenue. You're going to encourage more people to ride, and more people are going to get out and spend money on businesses. Isn't that intuitive?
But see, this is where I think it gets mixed in here when we say revenue and spending money on business. We're talking about specifically revenue to CATA, and from a ridership standpoint, how many people are going to get on the BRT, ride it, and pay the fare? So we're asking for revenue projections. We have three small business owners in here with us on the panel this morning. I'm thinking if they're looking to make an investment in their business, they're going to have some type of return on that investment. What are they projecting from a revenue standpoint? And so that was one of the questions I think that we asked as well. And I think that's been twisted. I think it's been twisted in the community.
They say, Tim, the projected BRT average weekday ridership last year was 10,800. Under this plan, it'd be 12,700. Maybe they haven't done the exact math for you, but doesn't that mean more revenue?
That would be news to me, Burl. I haven't
It's
seen
on
that.
the second page of their presentation.
Well, I think what's interesting, Burl, too, is that when we met with the CATA leadership as a policy committee, and it was members of the Chamber's board as well, and Tim brings up the revenue question. I think it's a good example, and I think the fact that you would call it common sense is kind of what all of us thought as well, that you wouldn't be going into an adventure like this with $140 million of taxpayer money without a clear sense of what that revenue picture would be. And if the answer is here on this PowerPoint deck, it wasn't available when we talked to them and asked that question. And so the fact that at that point, 7 to 8 years into this process, talking to the leadership of CATA, they could not provide a simple answer to a common sense question led us all to start questioning what was behind the transparency and the motivation behind all of it. It was just one of a number of questions that we all felt should be pretty simple to answer. That if this is something that you've been working on since the Granholm administration, that these questions should be answered. They should be answered quickly, and they should have been answered a long time ago. And the fact that they weren't answered in our meetings with them, I think led us all to start to wonder, is this plan fully baked, or is it still pretty half-baked? And it'd be one thing if we were talking about, no money, but we're talking about $140 million in taxpayer dollars that are going to go for something, and we completely support the concept of improving the transportation up and down that corridor, but that's a massive investment to go forward with when there are still very fundamental common sense questions that weren't answered.
Joe or Kevin, do you think their plan is sufficiently baked?
Well, I think it's fine to ask these kinds of questions and ask for further clarification. However, the general concern that we have here is, I'm in the tech business. If you were going to ask me how much I was going to make on fiber optic services 10 years ago, I had no idea, right? But I know the future. What the future is in fiber, and the future is certainly in rapid, high-density corridors. It's certainly in property development. Young kids nowadays don't want to be in suburbia, and we're seeing a reinvigoration of cities across the country. Do we want Lansing to be part of that, or do we want to take what is obviously a substantial backbone and chop it into a bunch of pieces and pick it apart? And the federal government is not going to hand out money like that without some likely utilization of ridership. I mean, they don't. I do. I've done government grants. My girlfriend runs the FRIB, but the FRIB. What's the revenue potential there? Who knows? But we're investing in that type of great science for that reason. And that this is one of those types of things where, when it's there, obviously people are already riding the bus, right? Obviously there's a demand for services. Why not make it faster and quicker for those people to use that infrastructure that they're already using? We're going to cut half the time out of thousands of people's days, assuming they're riding the whole corridor. 15 minutes out of 10,000 people's days is an incredible amount of time savings alone. Has somebody calculated the 15 minutes times 10,000 people, right? That's an incredible number of dollars that those people could otherwise be working and adding to the economy.
Joe, jump in.
We're big supporters of what the Chamber's doing, the questions that these two guys are asking, the questions that are coming up in the public debate. That's just all part of what's going to make this BRT possible. Our concern is, if you look at the headlines, it's just, we're constantly hearing, what the public, some of the public, a big portion of them, what they're hearing is that mass transit's a bad idea for Michigan Avenue. I think it's getting misinterpreted a little bit.
What headline said mass transit's a bad idea for Michigan Avenue?
Every headline on this story, Burl, has been negative.
That people are questioning it?
No, and the questioning is good. I just want to make sure that there's another story to this, and that is there are hundreds of millions of dollars worth of investment going in on this corridor. We definitely need a mass transit solution. I just hope that story just doesn't, we don't lose sight of that. And there's so much negativity on the BRT that I'm just worried that some people are thinking that mass transit might be.
The cover story in the City Pulse, which was I hesitate to use the slogan fair and balanced, but it was fair and balanced.
Well, I think the Meridian Township.
I would take issue with your story. I thought it was, Cosentino did a great job of interviewing the right people, but still, if you, I think a lot of people might have walked away from that seeing a little bit more of a darker side of mass transit. So.
Well, and I think, Joe, to your point, I think I'll speak carefully for my colleagues on the board who were in the meeting, that there was certainly a desire that we shared all of the goals and aspirations that you laid out for the corridor and for what mass transit and an improved Michigan Avenue would mean for the region. And that's why I think it was so difficult for all of us to wrestle with the fact that this is this is what we want for the region, and we're not getting the answers from the people who have been charged with coming up with a plan to deliver it. And that was a great frustration to us, because we think this is a great opportunity.
Right.
A great opportunity to do a lot of things. And for whatever reason, many steps along the way have, I think, shot the project, they've shot themselves in the foot in how it's been delivered and how it's been talked about. And I think it's a real shame that the opportunity has been
But you see
eliminated.
our point. I mean, MSU right now, within one block of this corridor, they've got 460 new housing units going up right now. Now, this will be an international community. The new housing that's going into Frandor. All these people moving in, thousands of new housing units are being built right now. We got to make sure that we have a solution to greet them, because the people that are going to be buying these homes and renting these rental units, I really do think they're the type of person that's going to want some kind of mass transit. They're not the types of people that are going to want to have
They're
3
going to be
cars.
mostly students.
Not really. I mean, well, in the 460 units that MSU is building, absolutely. But when you look at
most of the Skyview project, turns out it's students.
Well, look what the Gillespies are doing. Those aren't students. Look what the very large 9-story housing building that's going up at Frandor.
That's Skyview. That's mostly students.
Well, who cares if it's students or not?
Well, because
what do you-
they
when you
don't-
say
they
it's mostly
tend to-
students,
they'll use
it's
the
not even
bus
built yet.
Maybe
See,
to East Lansing.
I would doubt that. I do.
I don't know.
Walk a mile.
There's a lot of kids that go down Thirsty Thursday all the time, and that's
I see the entertainment trolley running empty almost all the time.
Sure. And it may very well run empty all the time, and let's get rid of it then. And why don't we just have a regular bus system that takes a short
Let's
amount of
talk
time
about
to
the
get back
left
and forth?
turn. Tim, you're starting to.
But no, I
address that.
just wanted to say something, because I think that you always try and find the common ground, right? When you have an issue like this, and I think that everyone agrees that this is about the economic growth, the investment, the prosperity along that corridor, and we believe that there are opportunities that CATA has now to invest in this current transportation infrastructure, such as the bus stops. They can enhance those today. They can make this a more inviting system to ride, and they could do that within that capital to campus section as well, and do that today to enhance, Joe, what you're talking about, all those developments. I mean, the young professionals that are going into the Easttown Flats and Scott Gillespie, but as well to support the students in there and where the
But
students
Tim,
want to
is
get there.
ridership a problem today? I thought the bigger problem was people sometimes have to wait for another bus.
Well, I think it depends on who you talk to there. I mean, whether or not the system, I think we've been told that the peak ridership hours are late morning and early afternoon. So that would kind of fly in the face of saying that we're looking at young millennials or young professionals who are living on the corridor or close to the corridor. They're hopping on the bus and taking it downtown to work or not. So I think that there's some gaps in there, and I think those are more the questions that we have. And I think, too, the other point that we had in the question was more in this regional and a comprehensive plan. The fact that we have pockets in this region of large and major employers that are not being serviced type of public transportation is a challenge. And so I think looking internally, there are efficiencies I think that could be had within the current system we have now before we start looking for this type of this type of large investment of the public taxpayer dollars that Matt mentioned.
Well, the $140 million is going somewhere. It can either go here or it can go into another city that wants to rebuild their main corridor.
Right.
And so I know that.
But that is not a bridge to nowhere argument.
No, it's not
No.
a bridge
We
to
got the
nowhere.
money, let's
No.
build it.
Well, if somebody says do you want your entire infrastructure rebuilt along an 8-mile corridor, I think that's probably a pretty good idea. I also think that it's a pretty good idea that we have dedicated bus lanes so people riding these buses can cut 15 minutes out of their day times 10,000 riders. Now, maybe they aren't going the whole distance, maybe they're going the half the distance, but we're saving thousands of hours a week for people who need this. So, if the question is no BRT versus a better BRT, that's a good debate and argument to have. Debate and argument to have. I don't think that that's going to go anywhere, though.
Do you think, Hunter? Do you think the highest and best use of $133 million in rapid transit money? Put aside that we don't have a choice, but is that the highest and best use to put it on Michigan Avenue when people won't take the bus because they have to transfer from their neighborhood and they're going to drive their car?
Burl, the bet we're trying to make here really is we're putting in thousands of units of housing. Now, of course, the low-hanging fruit to fill that housing up is, like you brought up, yes, it probably is students early on. But when you've got nice places to live, you will start to attract businesses that will employ people that will live in that housing, like we've seen in Old Town. So really, we're talking about a transformation.
You know what Lansing doesn't have compared to Grand Rapids? I spent a lot of time in Grand Rapids, a lot of time in Ann Arbor. I'm building infrastructure directly through the urban corridors of those cities. Lansing is missing a substantial young professional class, right? You go to the restaurants, you go to the bars, it's a totally different scene. Now we're starting to see that with some of the new, the new brew pubs that are down here, but it is not like young people come in and move into downtown Lansing. It's starting with these property developments, but it's all over the place. If you look at Grand Rapids, they have 15 buildings under construction, about half to equal the size of Skyview. 15-story buildings right in downtown, right? And they've got the critical mass. Lansing has got to get the critical mass in its downtown corridor, right? People in these young professionals do not want to live 5 miles out. And, I went to Art Prize, spent 4 days there riding my bike in the bus lane, right?
Well, you're describing what happened to Lansing in the 50s and 40s. We had people working in shops on the first level at the street level, and they lived above those stores. Now that I'm describing Washington Avenue right now. That's what I think the promise of the density of housing that's going into the corridor right now could start to happen up and down Michigan Avenue, which will also attract businesses.
Nobody is really disagreeing with the long-term goal, right?
Sure.
So let's drill down a little bit. You were starting to talk about the left turn question.
The left turn question.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we ever got to the question. I think I interrupted you and went back to the other.
Well, the issue, the left turn issue.
What
is that? What is that issue?
Well, I think that's the issue that we've heard again up and down the corridor, especially when you look at with Sparrow, the health system there and accessing in and out of there from a public safety standpoint. I know there's a lot of data that's talked about and whether the left turns or not. I don't know that the right argument in defense of that is saying, well, we're in Michigan, we're used to these Michigan left-hand turns, and so people will get accustomed to that. I don't know that we ever get accustomed to that. I think when you look at other parts of the region that have it, specifically South Lansing, it's problematic, and I think people avoid that particular area of the city, and I think South Lansing has that's part of some of the challenges I think with that part of the area as well. So
because you can't turn left. I think
when you get off of the interchange there at 96 and Cedar and Penn, and I think kind of navigating through that through that infrastructure there and making the left to get into some of the retail establishments there, it's challenging. And I will tell you, we always say this: if you're a visitor and you're coming in and you're doing that once, you're not doing it a second time. And so I think that those are some of the challenges that our members have indicated to us.
Well, agreed. I presume everyone will agree it will be a little more difficult to get to a business on the other side of the street. Right. But that much more difficult?
Well, I think part of it too, Burl, it goes a little bit to the inconsistency that I think a lot of business owners feel who live along the corridor, that the plan changes as you go from the Capitol through Lansing, by Frandor, through campus, and then into Meridian Township. Depending on the interests involved that you're passing, a center lane is just fine for some people, but for the Michigan State portion, well, we're not going to have that. So we'll change the plan to accommodate Michigan State. But and to all their credit, and good for them to get the plan the way that they would like it. But for then Meridian Township business owners or others to say, well, we have a concern about this. Why don't our concerns matter? Oh, it's the plan. It just makes sense to come back and go down the center. I think I think for myself, if I were on that corridor and I could see the kind of different treatment for different people and different entities along the corridor, where some folks' comments were taken into consideration, and others, I think, a lot of people have gotten the impression they've been turned away and ignored. I think that is a lot of what's driving some of this. Is that the legitimate concerns? Sure, we can get by with the left-hand turns. We can figure that out. But if I am owning a shop in Meridian Township, and I see that the plan can change for some people, but it can't change for others, why can't we have a conversation that takes everyone's concerns into mind and have a plan that works? I mean, Grand Rapids doesn't have a center lane, and Grand Rapids built a BRT for all the construction you're talking about for about a third of the cost that we're talking about in Lansing.
But if I believe in Grand Rapids, their plan only saved about a minute, and certainly we don't want that to happen here. Don't we need a better plan than Grand Rapids?
Well, I think that what goes to show is that I think the Grand Rapids plan has not borne fruit. They don't have, I think, the ridership that they were hoping to.
Well, they don't have a broad central corridor right through their business district. They'd have to demolish skyscrapers in order to build, to
but
do
they
that.
They have the same components we have here, though, and that is higher ed and healthcare, and they have education. Clearly not, the MSU, but with Grand Rapids Community College, you have Spectrum. So you have a lot of the same key sectors along that corridor, and it's just a different concept. They do the dedicated lanes, morning rush, evening rush hour. But once you get onto, is it Division Street that's in Grand Rapids, I think? Is that what it's running along? So Division Street, it becomes very similar to Michigan Avenue or to a South Cedar type corridor. You get out of that central business district, it's the same type of thing. It's a different, of different retail to service providing businesses to fast food restaurants and whatnot along that.
What do you? What's your reaction to what Matt said? That essentially the plan is unfair. That MSU can throw its weight around and not have this left turn problem.
Well, if everything was fair, we wouldn't probably be sitting here. Left turns seem to work pretty good in East Lansing. They're all over the place, right down the main drag. But there's also, that whole section has obviously been highly refurbished, right? So there may be some level of sunk investment cost, but we're looking at sections of Lansing, which is totally unrefurbished. I mean, I can tell you right now, I can't take a left turn between 4:30 and 6. Most of Grand River in Meridian Township. It's a zoo and it's dangerous, right?
So you can't do it
to a business.
Can't do it now.
Right. I mean, you can't do it now. So perhaps a more organized and structured pathway would be better. I also think that if they can integrate bike pathways along the buses, I bike everywhere. I'd far rather compete with 2 or 3 or 4 large buses than dozens and dozens and hundreds of cars whizzing by in the lanes. So I think there's an opportunity to really coalesce this architecture. Everybody needs to get their fight out of them. But when you see things like Meridian Township, who just flatly says, we don't want BRT, well, that's just silly, right? So you don't want better transportation for people who are already riding the bus, right? The Myers is a zoo every spring, and every football Saturday as well. So I think what, nobody is giving a concise, this is a deal killer of the plan, okay? All that they're doing is picking at a few little pieces. Well, we don't like left turns. Well, I don't like left turns either, but we all got to make a left turn sometime, right?
I think it's more than that. I think it's part of that, Kevin, but I also think, too, there has to be accountability here. I think there has to be transparency and there has to be leadership. And I think we've seen a lack of leadership in how this project has been planned and how it's being presented now to the community. So those 3 things, and quite honestly, that's kind of where we see ourselves in a role that we have in here in representing the business community, is to make sure that those questions are being addressed. And I think in looking at Meridian Township and riding Route 1 and taking it from downtown all the way to the Meridian Mall, I will tell you that we get Hagedorn, and each time I ride that, it's BRT all the way to Myers because no one's getting on or off. And so I think that's what the Meridian Township businesses those are retailers in there. Don't you get Hagedorn down to, getting into that main corridor with Meyernet? Those are retail folks in there, and they're saying that. And they're saying, look, there's no one getting on or off of these stops on a consistent basis. And so why are you going to
But you take that BRT, the plan the way it is right now, and when Myers is offering up 60 parking spots, I think these are the little rays of light that could probably change that behavior. Because really what you're talking about, and it's a really good point, is will people in our suburbs give up their car and start riding this BRT? That's where the extra traffic will come from. So I just think as the solution that Myers has offered to carve out part of their parking lot so you can park your car and get onto the bus, there's upwards of 100 more people right there.
Sure.
So I see that as I see that as a good positive thing. But would the chamber agree though that between CATA and the DOT, that they do have the engineering capability, along with the federal government's help, to actually get a system that could work for the area? I mean,
I don't know that I have the ability to answer that. I don't know that I know that for certain that they do. I mean, do they have engineers on staff? I mean, yes, but if you're going to leave it to the federal government and the state government to dictate and say that this is going to work and work efficiently for our region, I don't know that I have the confidence to say that. I mean, I think each region is different. I think you've seen that with Cleveland and what they did that made sense for the Euclid Avenue corridor, to what Grand Rapids did, to what Lansing, where we are today and what we need.
Well, there's 160 BRTs peppered throughout the world right now, and there's quite a few in the United States. And statistically, they're looking pretty good. I mean, when you look at the consultants that have gone back and have scored them, they're working and they're doing well. I mean, that's why the concept keeps getting advanced. I just hope that hopefully in the planning process we can get it figured out.
I want to ask you all quick answers to this, but one of the things that surprised me is CATA ultimately is going to decide whether to do this or not. And I've asked them a couple of times, and they said, yeah, it's up to our board. Shouldn't the municipalities and jurisdictions have something to say about this? Are you comfortable that CATA gets to decide this?
Well, the road is a DOT road. It's Michigan DOT.
Right.
And I'm sure people could throw some monkey wrenches into the problem, into the project, and slow things down. But ultimately, it's going to get done one way or the other. So let's try to make it the best BRT rather than, kill it. I mean.
So you're confident that the CATA board should make the ultimate decision. Do you agree with that?
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I will tell you, and at the same time, our board, we really haven't discussed that either. But I think that's, to me, where the accountability comes into place, and the fact that there might be too much authority with that authority if they're able to do that. And so I think we have to take into account from the Capitol to 127, City of Lansing, owns that, responsible for that stretch, and then from 127 east, it's MDOT. So, where's the City of Lansing? I think they're going to probably play a significant part in this as well. I'm guessing before before anything is approved and
it could end up being an election issue. I want to thank Matt very quickly.
I guess I was surprised going into this process to learn how little accountability the CATA has.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all. Tim Damon, Matt Rush from the Chamber, Kevin Shane from ACD.net, and Joe Ross, Communications and Research, and from Better Together, BRT somehow. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.